And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, a great day where there is every sort of breaking news available. Just hours ago, the word came down that advisors are saying that President Trump will fire Kristi Noem as the Secretary of Homeland Security. And who will her replacement be? You'll be amazed, but we will get to that on the Medved Show. Also, on Iranian TV, which is still functioning despite the ongoing and expanding war, the Ayatollah Abdullah Javadi Amoli, who is one of Iran's most senior Islamic clerics, declared on Iranian TV that the nation was on the verge of a great test, and he urged the shedding of Zionist blood and the shedding of Trump's blood on state television. Meanwhile, there is this interesting number, just one. At the start of the Iraq War, that was back in 2003, between 70 and 74% of Americans supported the U.S.-led military invasion. Okay, remember that was based on wrong information, as it turned out, about the development of nuclear weapons by Saddam Hussein. He was not on the verge of developing them, and the war ended up being highly unpopular by its conclusion. Today, at the start of the Iran war in March of this year, just days ago, only a small minority, ranging from approximately 21% to 39%, support the war against Iran. Is it a good idea, or is it, as Dr. Richard Haass suggests? Dr. Richard Haass is a former head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he wrote a book about the distinction between wars of choice and wars of necessity. He says that what we have right now is definitely a war of choice. It's not a necessity. And he says it's a very questionable war of choice. No, Haass is wrong. That's the idea of Bret Stephens, the extraordinarily articulate and persuasive columnist for the New York Times. He believes that we made the right decision, a fateful right decision that will lead to a better world altogether by going against this Iranian regime. Both Dr. Haass and Bret Stephens at different times are going to be on the show today. So it's a particularly important exchange of views. Here's a very latest on the war news from CBS. Israel and Iran launched new strikes, both sides, as the war in the Middle East entered its sixth day, with Iran matching U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's escalatory rhetoric and threatening, quote, more intense and widespread attacks to cripple the whole region's economy. This is, by the way, particularly true in the very vulnerable oil economy, with already seeing a rise in gas prices around the world, but also the travel economy, with thousands upon thousands of canceled flights, delayed flights, disruptions in what's going on. The war continues to spread with new Israeli strikes in Lebanon and on Tehran. Why Lebanon? Because that is the headquarters for Hezbollah, which is one of those Iranian proxy terrorist groups that is located in southern Lebanon. And the Iranian drones hit neighboring Azerbaijan for the first time. Now, this is remarkable and very dangerous, because one of the things about Iran is not 100% Persian, not close to it. The New York Times reports that about 60% of the population, 93 million people in Iran, are Persian, but many others are different groups. Balak, they are Kurds, and there are Azeris. Azeris are people who are linked ethnically to neighboring Azerbaijan. So the fact that Iran now is attacking Azerbaijan for the first time, they're attacking a country where a high percentage, up to 40% of the Iranian population is non-Persian. And those Azeris are the biggest group in that 40%. America's Gulf allies, pummeled for days by Iranian missiles and drones, are rapidly running out of interceptors to shoot down those missiles. This is according to CBS News' Margaret Brennan. The U.S. government, meanwhile, after sharp criticism over pre-war planning, has begun assisting thousands of Americans trying to evacuate from the Middle East, with the State Department saying it's working on a series of options to get people home. There's also this from CBS, and it's extraordinary. Ukraine is sending help. I mean, Ukraine has its own job to do resisting the evil Russian invasion, but they are sending drone experts to help the American forces and our allies in the Middle East to help fend off Iranian drone attacks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Kyiv will send drone experts to the Middle East to help the U.S. and its partners defend against Iran's Shahed drones, given Ukraine's experience with countering a modified version of those drones that is used commonly by Russia. Zelensky said on X that we received a request from the United States for specific support in protection against Shaheds in the Middle East region. I gave instructions to provide the necessary means and ensure the presence of Ukrainian specialists who can guarantee the required security. Zelensky said that on X, and he added, Ukraine helps partners who help ensure our security and protect the lives of our people. Meanwhile, closer to home, the House of Representatives is planning to vote later today on another attempted war powers resolution that is expected to fail. This is just a day after yesterday the Senate defeated a similar measure, largely along party lines. Senator Rand Paul, the Republican of Kentucky, who generally opposes sending U.S. forces into foreign conflicts, was the only Republican senator yesterday to vote for the resolution, which was aimed at reining in Trump's authority to continue military action in Iran. And by the way, it's aimed at reining in Trump's authority to continue military action. In other words, it's surrendering, it's handing a victory to the Iranians. And some of the psychosis behind that desire was revealed yesterday. We played on the show an excerpt from Rand Paul's father, the former congressman and presidential candidate Ron Paul, who is clearly deeply opposed to this war. So what is happening next on the explosive Epstein front? That and much more coming up on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, another vote today by another House of Congress. Yesterday, the Senate voted along party lines, with the exception of Rand Paul, who was the one Republican who voted for a war powers resolution that would have put Congress on record as formally disapproving of this war. And that is what the polls indicate a majority of Americans believe right now. Today, the House will vote on another war powers resolution, but it's also expected to fail. Republicans, after all, control both houses of Congress, and Republicans, except for Rand Paul of Kentucky, are falling in line with President Trump on this particular issue. But Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, the Democrat, is the only Democrat who has consistently joined with Republicans against these war power resolutions. He voted against it yesterday. While the votes are symbolic, the Hill notes, given and not symbolic but not effectual, because given that they could not overcome a Trump veto, and he would certainly veto them, even if they made it to his desk, the Hill says they are still key in shaping the policy discussions in Washington in the early days of the Iran conflict. CNN is reporting Republican senators yesterday rejected the war powers resolution that would have required the Trump administration to seek congressional approval before continuing military action against Iran. It also would have required an end to the current action within 60 days, which appears to be the intention of the Trump administration anyway. This comes as Democrats have criticized President Donald Trump, writes CNN, for expanding U.S. military involvement in Iran without approval from Congress. The vote was 53 to 47 against the war powers resolution, with Kentucky GOP Senator Rand Paul joining Democrats in voting to advance the resolution, and Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania siding with Republicans to vote against it. The House will vote on the issue today, or at least it is scheduled to do so. Meanwhile, the financial and logistical troubles the Iran war is causing for the global aviation industry are compounded by the day, with the number of canceled flights to Middle East hubs surpassing, are you ready for this? 23,000 flights. And each of those flights involving obviously hundreds of people who are impacted by flights not taking place. That's 23,000 canceled flights since fighting began. The Emirates, the world's largest international airline, who knew, extended its suspension of flights to Dubai through the end of this coming Saturday, a full week since the U.S. and Israel launched their joint attack. Qatar Airways extended its service halts into Friday. And that appears to be only the beginning. And then there is this from Mediaite. Trump floats GOP senator to potentially replace Noam. Okay, given her performance, which we played some of on the show yesterday, Kristi Noem was beyond pathetic in answering questions from Republicans as well as Democrats, and not answering questions, simply trying to talk over people who were asking her questions, and left her extremely dubious in her position. This is what Mediaite reports. President Donald Trump has reportedly floated Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican of Oklahoma, as a replacement for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in private conversations with GOP allies this week, as reports swirl that he is on the verge of firing her. The news comes after a contentious week of congressional testimony for Noem that had allegedly angered the president so much that he began calling key congressional Republicans to question whether he should replace her. That was reported by Punchbowl News on Thursday. During those conversations, and a further revelation published just hours later, the New Republic reported that the president had pushed Markwayne Mullen's name several times when discussing who could take up the role if Noam was to go. Now, Markwayne Mullen has been notorious on late-night comedy shows. They play excerpts of his recent commentary on the war, where he doesn't seem to understand that Iraq and Iran are different countries. No, I'm serious. He is continually talking about our campaign against Iraq and Iraq's nuclear weapons. Well, no, that's the wrong country, sir. But then again, he would be director of Homeland Security, not Foreign Affairs. Speaking with reporters on Capitol Hill yesterday, Senator Mullen denied any discussions with the White House about a potential shakeup. I haven't talked to the president, the Republican from Oklahoma said, adding, I haven't talked to him about the hearing at all. I can't help you there. I'm sorry. Trump reportedly grew furious after Kristi Noem's back and forth with Senator John Kennedy, who, of course, is a loyal Republican, a very popular Republican with a best-selling book about how to avoid qualifying as stupid. In any event, I'm not sure that Markwayne Mullen, his colleague in the Senate, has read that book. But in any event, Senator Kennedy was going back and forth with Kristi Noem during a Senate Judiciary hearing yesterday when she suggested under oath that the president had approved a $220 million taxpayer-funded ad campaign that featured her, and that would be for promoting the cause of the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. This came with further scrutiny of the contracting process for that campaign of ads, including a no-bid deal and subcontracting ties to Noem's political allies. The questioning for Kristi Noem also included questions about whether she was presently involved in an adulterous sexual relationship with Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign director for President Trump. It is all a complicated mess, but nothing compared to some of the other Epstein-related messes, which we will get to coming up on the Medved Show. With all of the attention, I think, rightly focused on an extraordinarily significant war that is going on, and yes, it is a war. It isn't just a limited military action. It is a war to prevent the most destructive and dangerous country in the world from getting the most destructive and dangerous weapons in the world, and preventing those weapons from being used to attack the United States of America, our allies, and other countries in the region. There have now been 14 different nations that have been hit by Iranian missiles or drones or attacks. Most of them, fortunately, shot down on the way, but enough getting through to have killed already hundreds of people. Meanwhile, there is a headline like this that appears in what you'd think was an innocent source, OK Magazine, an Oklahoma magazine, and they have the headline that says Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico ranch probed following dead bodies tip. Okay, that's what we've been missing in the entire Epstein saga is murder accusations. And the article from OK Magazine says Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico ranch. Who knew he had a New Mexico ranch? The island everybody knows about, and the luxurious home in New York City, but a New Mexico ranch, called the Zorro Ranch. It is finally being probed after a morbid FBI tip resurfaced. Dubbed Zorro Ranch when the late predator owned the sprawling Santa Fe property, an email alleging that girls were buried somewhere on the outskirts of that ranch was included in the latest batch of Epstein-related files released in late January. By the way, Ann Coulter has announced that she has been poring over the Epstein files. She's read over 50,000 different documents so far, and she's concluded that she needs 50,000 different showers after reading all the material. In any event, this new anonymous email was addressed to an Albuquerque, New Mexico, a radio host named Eddie Aragon, I don't know him, who then alerted local authorities. The message said 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Madam G is a reference to Ghislaine Maxwell, his companion. Someone claiming to be a former employee at the desert compound, the Zorro Ranch, sent the disturbing message. Quote, "Did you know somewhere in the hills outside the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G?" That's what the anonymous sender wrote, referring to the late pedophile's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. The person noted both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex. Okay? The sender demanded money in exchange for footage of Jeffrey Epstein. The writer also claimed to have video footage of Epstein engaging in sexual activities with minors and demanded that 1 Bitcoin be sent to him later that day. The USB will be sent anonymously to your attention by overnight courier upon receipt of the funds. The email stated, "You have my assurance," so I'm sure that's solid, that this exclusive never shared before. No attorneys, no samples, no questions, please. Oh, no questions. You're saying you have evidence of murder and you're saying no questions, please? It remains unclear whether the FBI has ever looked into the tip. Meanwhile, Reuters say that lawmakers last month, this is in New Mexico, passed legislation to launch an investigation into the Zorro Ranch, the Epstein property, which was owned by Epstein from 1993 until his suicide in federal custody while facing sex trafficking charges in 2019. The decision was made after New Mexico State Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia Richard allowed for a probe into the allegations. I feel like New Mexico was chosen by Epstein, she said, because of its obscurity. According to an article published in the New York Times on March 1st. So all of this is just breaking news. Andrea Romero, a New Mexico state representative who is leading the probe, declared, "We need to find out how he was able to operate without any accountability." What about the idea that he murdered people and their bodies are buried out there in his former property? His property is now owned by a Texas businessman and a former state senator named Don Huffines, who recently released a statement explaining authorities have his full cooperation in investigating the search for dead bodies. Okay, meanwhile, back in the war, pro-American Iranian Kurdish forces, the Kurds being one of those ethnic minorities who would threaten to break up the sovereign existence of the nation of Iran if Iran continues losing the war. The pro-American Iranian Kurdish forces, who are based in Iraq, are preparing armed units that could enter Iran, helping the United States, creating a potential new front in an already expanding conflict, according to Iraqi officials and senior members of Iranian Kurdish groups. The CIA has previously given small arms to the Iranian Kurdish forces as part of a covert program to destabilize Iran, an effort that began before the current war. That, according to people familiar with the effort. In a briefing yesterday, Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, said reports that President Trump had agreed to any plan for the Kurds to launch an insurgency in Iran were completely false. Why should they be false? Why wouldn't we want Kurdish people who have no country of their own? They have a province that they help to run in Iraq called Kurdistan. But this is a proud, significant people who have 1,000-year history in the Middle East or more. And they have leaned toward the United States, toward democracy, toward sanity, and been our allies in Iraq and against ISIS. Why shouldn't they be our allies very effectively against Iran? So we will find out more on this issue. It's an important issue in terms of putting additional pressure on the Iranian government to, well, basically to give up their nuclear weapons program and help to negotiate an end to this war. Why are they not doing that? And what does that reveal? We will get to that and to much more coming up with Bret Stephens of the New York Times coming up too, right here on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, we were talking earlier about the talk in Washington that has become feverish about the dismissal, the firing that is pending of Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And her performance in congressional testimony yesterday has to be seen to be disbelieved. It is extraordinarily embarrassing, and very embarrassing for the Republicans who actually did some of the most aggressive questioning of the Secretary of Homeland Security. But she's not the only one in the Trump cabinet who is in a difficult situation. The Hill is reporting that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, has been subpoenaed by the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which has voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify over her handling of the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. The redaction of all kinds of details and the personal identity of various people in the Epstein files, particularly including, but not limited to, Donald Trump, where he has mentioned literally hundreds of thousands of times, some people say over 1 million times in these millions of pages of material. But he seems to be uniquely and consistently redacted. In other words, somebody's protecting him. Now, Pam Bondi is the one in charge at the Justice Department, so she has some explaining to do. The resolution to subpoena Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, was introduced by a Republican and an ambitious Republican named Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina. It passed in a bipartisan 24-19 vote. The subpoena would make Bondi the highest-ranking Trump administration official to testify before the House committee as it continues its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and the government's records on him. Bondi has faced criticism from both sides of the aisle for her handling of the document's release, which critics have said has been plagued with thousands of missing files and others that should not have been made public, that were. The Department of Justice has said it's reviewing whether any additional files have been withheld. And meanwhile, President Trump is spending more time on trying to lead the nation successfully through a very important war. We will get to the conversation about whether that war was necessary or not, or whether it was simply a war of choice. That's a very hot debate. But President Trump seems to be excited by where we are right now. Here is the president, clip 9.
These are exciting times. I think you probably want to speak about war rather than this, but this is very important. This is very important, and we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15. And we're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far. And that was a tremendous threat to us for many years. 47 years they've been killing our people and killing people from all over the world. And I think we have great support. And I think if we didn't do it first, they would have done it to Israel and give us a shot if that was possible.
The idea that we are scoring a 15 on a scale of 10, he used a similar line before with the previous American attack in June, the 12-day war, where we bombed their nuclear facilities. And if we had been that successful the first time around, would this new attack have been as necessary and important as it is? I think. The answer to that is complicated. But yesterday, President Trump again spoke about the urgency of taking advantage of the opportunity that he saw with Iran's vulnerability and the conflict in the streets and the murder of literally thousands of people by the Iranian regime. This was President Trump yesterday, clip 12.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack a number of months ago, they would have a nuclear weapon. And when crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen. So we're in very good shape now. I want to let you know that, and we will continue forward. But it's a great display of military strength.
All of that could well be true, but there is a question here. And the question is for people who don't think that this attack is necessary. One of the lines that they bring up is that there are lots of countries that have nuclear weapons, and they are not a threat to the rest of the world. For instance, Israel has nuclear weapons. They've never formally acknowledged it, but everybody knows, and they knows where the nuclear facilities are in Dimona in Israel. And Israel has had nuclear weapons for years. Why are people not afraid of Israel attack? Because Israel is a functioning democracy, and it is not a country that pledges to annihilate its neighbors. But Iran does pledge that, and they are so insistent on maintaining a nuclear capacity that they are willing to go through this war and this devastation and death and ruination and tremendous battering of the Iranian economy simply for the sake of holding on to the possibility of attacking the rest of the world with nuclear arms. Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, talks about broadening the war with boots on the ground. Is that a possibility? Here is Carolyn Levitt from the White House. This is clip 10.
Could you tell us about the president's current thinking about ground troops and whether they could be used? If they were to be sent into Iran, what would they be used for? What's the situation?
Well, they're not part of the plan for this operation at this time, but I certainly will never take away military options on behalf of the President of the United States or the Commander-in-Chief, and he wisely does not do the same for himself. I know there's many leaders in the past who like to take options off of the table without having a full understanding of how things could develop. So again, it's not part of the current plan, but I'm not going to remove an option for the President that is on the table.
Okay, the option of boots on the ground on the table. This is coming at a time when there is speculation, wide speculation about who the new leaders in Iran will be. Coming up, we will talk more about the war and about whether it is a war of necessity or a war of choice? Or is it something different, a war of opportunity because of the turmoil in Iran itself? Dr. Richard Haass, who for many years was president of the Council on Foreign Relations, says, this is a war of choice, definitely not of necessity, and the choice, he says, is dubious. Meanwhile, we'll be speaking to Bret Stephens, who has lived in the Middle East, worked there, is a columnist for the New York Times, and has written one of the most persuasive and eloquent arguments in behalf of actually conducting this war. And not just conducting it, but winning it. And what does winning it mean, and what does it require? And how likely is that kind of victory at this point? We will get to that and much more with Bret Stephens, all coming up and in the midst of battle, right here for this greatest nation on God's green earth.
Sign up today for our free weekly newsletter at michaelmedved.com.